So we know about one way to sketch a graph. Actually, we know about two. We can either plot a table of values and then plot all of our points from a given rule, or else last lesson we also looked at finding our intercepts and graphing that way. Today we're going to learn about another way of sketching linear graphs, which is using those two very important pieces of information I've been talking about, which are the gradient and the y-intercept. And hopefully you remember y equals mx plus c is our general form of our linear graph. And so if we're given a rule for a graph that looks like this, I can find or identify my gradient and my y-intercept. So the steps for graphing using these two bits of information I've written down here, and you might like to write these down in your book too. So the first thing we do is we identify or find our y-intercept, then we identify our gradient, and we put it in rise over run form. We make the y-intercept our starting point on our graph, and then we use the gradient and rise over run to identify the next point that we're going to plot. And because we know from when we graphed using intercepts that we only need 2 points on our graph, once we have the y-intercept and then we use the gradient to find the next point, we can join those points and we're done. So, over on this next slide, I've identified that my y-intercept is this bit here. So I'll write that general form down again. So remembering that that sign in front of the c value is attached to that c value. So our y-intercept is -3, and our gradient is this bit here, which is 2. If I was to write this gradient in rise over run form, all I do is I put it over 1. So I divide that 2 by 1. So if your gradient's not given to you as a fraction, you can make it a fraction, and then you can identify which bit is your rise and which bit's your run. And so this gradient means that from this y-intercept point, which we know we can write as a coordinate, 0, 3, so I'll just plot that, 0, -3, what we're going to do is we're going to go up 2 units, 1, 2, and then we're going to go across 1 unit to get to our next point, which is going to be, I can read that off the graph, x first, so we're at 1, -1. And then I join them as a point, putting those little arrows at the end. So it's always important to label the 2 coordinate points that we've used to plot the graph and then put the arrows at the end. So let's have a look at another example just to make sure we're okay with this. Okay, so in this one our y-intercept is +4. Our gradient is -5 divided by 2. So I've taken or put my y-intercept as a coordinate point, remembering that for my y-intercept the x value is always 0. So we're going to start at 0, 4 this time. And again I'm going to label this 0, 4. And then this gradient tells me that I'm going to go down 5 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now I'm at -1 for every 2 units I go across. So then I'm going to go across 2 to get to this point here, which is 2, -1. And again joining them with my line. And that is how we use our gradient and y-intercept to sketch our graph.